Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, there is a lot of talk in the corporate world at the moment about data integration and syncing data from multiple applications, APIs and databases and warehouses and so many other destinations. But I recently discovered a company called Airbyte that does all that and is open sourced too. So I felt compelled to find out more, especially when I also learned that over 4,000 companies in the world have already synced data using Airbyte and have raised $31 million in funding. So Michel Tricot is the CEO and co-founder of Airbyte. So I invited him on the podcast today to join us and share his story, along with share more information about this open source data integration platform and what makes it different from other solutions such as Fivetran and StitchData. But enough from me. Buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California, where he's waiting to share his story with us right now. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm Michel. I am originally from France. I moved in the US like 10 years ago. And I'm the CEO and co-founder of Airbyte. So Airbyte is a data integration, open source data integration platform. And we help companies and people move data from any sources, whether it's a file, an API or anything, and move it into the destination, whether it's a data lake, data warehouse, or even APIs. And yeah, I've been working in the data space for the past 15 years, started more like financial data, then moved to like ad tech and martech. That's where I really got my scars around data integration. We're moving hundreds and hundreds of terabytes of data every single day across thousands of different actors in the martech ecosystem. And yeah, early 2020, John, my co-founder, and I decided to start Airbyte.
And as a fellow European, I've got to ask, with 10 years in San Francisco or in the US, what do you miss most about home? Is it little bits of food, or what is it that you miss?
So I would say in San Francisco, we're very lucky. The food is delicious in San Francisco. Yeah. One thing that happened is like every single time when I go to France, when I go to Paris, when I go to like this small village, medieval village in the countryside, I'm like, this looks beautiful. You're in Paris and there is a statue. There are like old buildings everywhere, and you just this looks really beautiful.
Yeah, it's the history, I think, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that path that you've been on has led you to becoming CEO and co-founder of Airbyte, which, as you said, is an open source data integration platform. But can you tell me more about the problems that you set out to solve with your technology right from the beginning?
When you think of any single company today, they are generally using a huge variety of tools, whether it's like a SaaS tool, whether it's a database, or whether they just receive files from partners, they just extract files, or they have like queues and places where they have data that is being fragmented. And what is happening right now is like the more modern data warehouse like BigQuery, Redshift, Snowflake. People want to get all this data centralized into this space so that they can better leverage, join, and figure out how the data is correlated, figure out how the data matches to data you have in another system to extract the best insights so that they can make the best decision for their company. And when you look at the variety of sources that you can have, it's almost infinite. If you look at existing commercial solutions in general, they have like about 100 sources that they can support. But whenever we talk to people who are buying this solution, what they tell us is, no, we're buying this solution, but we're also building all these data integration and sources in-house, and we maintain them. And every single company is doing the same thing. And what we've done actually with Airbyte is we've created a standard for exchanging data between sources and destination. And we are inviting and we are helping our community to actually build like this long tail of sources, and so that you can start having access to data wherever it is without having to involve too much engineering effort and without having to do the maintenance yourself.
And I think I should highlight at this point that I think since that moment, over 4,000 companies have synced their data using Airbyte, and over $31 million has been raised. So I'm curious though, is there a use case that you could share just to bring to life what you're doing here and help listeners understand how you might be able to help them and especially transform their world too?
I would say like a very basic example is your company, and what you want is you want to have your 360 view of your customer. And the thing is, your customer, you have touch points with them across many, many systems. You might have them on Salesforce, you might have them on Facebook, you might have them on Google Analytics, on HubSpot, on Zendesk. I mean, I can go for an hour just listing services to you. And you also have your own internal databases. You have your own events that you're collecting about what is the user doing with my product. And the problem is like all this data is clustered, it's siloed. And then you're going to ask your data analyst, your analytics engineer, or your data engineer, like, tell me something about the customer that I don't know, so I know what to build, so I know how to talk to them, so I know where they're dropping off, and all of that. And the problem is at that point, like your data analyst, your analytics engineer is stuck because the data is across many, many systems. So first of all, before they can do any type of analytics, they need to pull that data. So need to get data from a database, need to get data from a file on S3, need to get data across Salesforce, Zendesk, etc. And that's where we're here for, right? We are helping these roles to actually centralize the data so that now they can do their job and extract the insights. And the other use case would be more like, I'm building a product. As a product, I'm serving my customers. And to serve my customer, actually, my product needs to have access to my customer data. And as a company, what I want to do is I just want to build the feature on top of the data. I don't want to have to build all the pipes. And one thing that we've seen a lot of traction on is this company, what they do is they take Airbyte and they use Airbyte as like what we call a connectivity layer, meaning they don't have to build the pipes, they just get Airbyte, and now they can pull data on behalf of their customer across all these services. And they can really focus on what kind of insights, what kind of actionable action their customer can take with that data.
And for techies listening, what would you say makes Airbyte different from other solutions out there? And a few that spring to mind would be Fivetran and StitchData. What separates you guys from those solutions?
I would say that the biggest differentiating factor is that we are open source, meaning that we are inviting people and we're inviting companies and we're inviting engineers to contribute to the project and to bring their own sources so that they can suddenly share the burden of maintaining these sources. Because we're open source also, we natively run on foreign infrastructure. And, when you're talking with data, with GDPR, with CCPA, like companies are becoming more and more aware of the responsibility that they have toward the data of their customers. And at that point, there is a lot of company for which it's a no-go to exfiltrate the data to a third party. So instead, what they do is they take Airbyte and they can install it in their infrastructure. They get the connectors, they get upgraded, and they can start running all their data pipelines through Airbyte. And also that gives you more control over your cost. Data just grows exponentially. And it's not because you have a lot of data that it brings you a lot of value, but you still need to have all the data to get the value. And by being open source, by making it possible to run on a foreign infrastructure, then they have control on the cost and they don't have to pay around like a volume of data or like a number of lines that is being replicated.
And as you said there, you are talking to a lot of companies and a lot of engineers. And I'm curious, what are the biggest questions or challenges that your customers and those people that you're speaking with are coming to you and asking for your help with, especially around business intelligence? Is there any particular questions that keep cropping up?
So generally, the first question is, do you support X? Do you support source X? Can I pull data from source X? That is generally how the conversation starts. Yeah. And that's because that's the need that they have. Now, in terms of business intelligence, I would say because we're focusing very much on extract and load, we're a little bit separate from it. But what we get, though, is people are struggling with transformation. So at that point, we just explain to them like what we call the modern data stack, which is how you extract, how you load, how you expose that data to your data analyst, and then what kind of system you can put on top of that to enable roles that are less technical to do this transformation, to do this analysis. And for example, dbt is a great tool for that. We always recommend to have an association of Airbyte plus dbt, because this way you start having, this is the first building block to build a very, very solid business intelligence pipeline. And I won't say we help so much on like what kind of analytics you can do, because these are questions that are very specific to your business, but we can guide you to what kind of tools you can use to become like a 10x analyst or data analyst or data engineer.
And I think every organization was beginning to realize that they had all those pockets of siloed data and quickly realize that they want to try and unite that data from all those different sources, get it into one place. And that's when you can start bringing out those valuable insights. But are there any trends around machine learning and artificial intelligence that particularly excite you on that front?
Yes, the fact that, and I think Google has been spearheading that on like with BigQuery, where machine learning used to be something that only experts could do. And I think by integrating machine learning capability in warehouses, suddenly you can give that responsibility to people that might be less machine learning specialists or like less data, less engineering specialists, and they can start doing their own modeling. They can start doing their own analysis. And I think that's to us, that's really how the data is moving today. The world of data is we are building a very solid data infrastructure, and instead of the responsibility of doing something with the data landing on the hands on engineers, we can now push it to people who actually need the answers directly. So we are inverting the responsibilities.
And I think we could both name many, many examples of new businesses or businesses that are cold calling other organisations, saying they've got a new solution that's got artificial intelligence, machine learning, and blockchain, but very often it doesn't even have any of those technologies. Yeah. So I'm curious, are there any myths or misconceptions in the industry that frustrate you that we can just finally lay to rest today?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be too negative about it, but it is true that machine learning is always used as a buzzword. Yeah. I mean, most of the time when people talk about machine learning, it's a lot about rule-based system, or like they've done a few extraction and they've understood that 80% of the data matches this rule, and they call it machine learning. I would say that's the most. I'm always very careful when I say we do machine learning with a product, because in general, it's going to be something very simple. Now, with tools like BigQuery, making machine learning so approachable, I think that will become more true in the future, that this is machine learning, because you don't need to be an expert to create machine learning model, to create model and to extract and predict the future or understand the past.
Absolutely. And I'm curious, how do you see the worlds of data infrastructure, security, and integration not only colliding, but evolving together as we continue to move forward? Is there anything you can share around that?
You know, when you think of the data world, I think there's been a lot of focus on the consumer side, meaning BI tools, dashboarding, et cetera, and bit by bit, I think we're basically going in the other direction, which is now we have amazing warehouses. And that's something that really started a few years ago only. And now we're starting to get, okay, now I have a warehouse. I have all these amazing tools that can enable my teams to do amazing things with data and get me the best insights. But how do I get the data into my warehouse? And most importantly, how do I do it in a secure way and in a compliant way? I think it's just the world has realized how important data is and some of the abuse of data that's been in the past. And what we see is that the source of the data has to be tightly controlled without hindering the consumption of this data. So what we see is that there are going to be more company being created and more product being created between the silos of data and the warehouse, or even within the warehouse, to control who accesses the data. Am I exposing data that I should not? Like, for example, I'm in the US, like social security number is something you should never give access to an analyst or to an engineer or to anyone in an organization. Like, how do I make sure that I'm not leaking that type of data? And then it's also like, where is that data coming from? Because if I get a request to delete that data from one of my users, how do I go back and make sure that this data get deleted? So I think in terms of lineage, in terms of control, but at the same time, we want to open that data so we can do more of it. We'll see a lot of things over there.
Well, I've loved chatting with you today. I love the direction that you've taken here and hearing more about your story and the story behind Airbyte. But I want time to have a little bit of fun with you now, because I always like to ask my guests if there was a particular song or piece of music that has inspired them on their tech career, or just helps them get their head in the zone before work or going into a big meeting or going on stages. Is there a song that you would like us to add to our Spotify playlist? And is there a story behind that choice too?
You know, I'm a very big fan of Stromae. You know Stromae? And it's a song that I've listened like 10, 15 years ago. I forgot. Time is blurry now. It's called Alors on danse, which I think it's just it's a story about, like, you might have issues every day, but what you want is to really enjoy life and make sure you make the best of it. And it's a very it has a good rhythm, and I think it's the kind of song that if you don't listen too much to the lyrics, you feel really energized.
Yeah, and I think in the current climate, man, I think enjoying life and making the most of it, that's the kind of soundtrack that we all need. So I'll add that to the playlist. But for everyone listening that would like to find out more information about Airbyte and the kind of work you're doing and contact your team, etc., where's the best place to start there?
Yeah, so I would say first start with our website, like airbyte.io. Yeah. And then we also have a public Slack. We have over 2,500 community member on it. It's called, so you can join it on slack.airbyte.io. And of course, I'm on Twitter. You can find all this information on the website. So yeah, cannot wait to see your listener reaching out and trying Airbyte.
Cool, man. Well, there's so much I love about our conversation today, but in particular, I always say that technology works best when it brings people together. But what I love about your story here is how Airbyte was built on that vision to commoditize data integration pipelines across all industries and all organizations. It's incredible what you're doing here, but more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to share it with us all today.
Thank you, Neil.
I just love this story of how Michel has been working in data engineering for the past 15 years. When he was head of integrations and engineering director at Liveramp, he grew a team responsible for building and scaling the data ingestion and data distribution connectors, syncing hundreds of terabytes every day. But it feels like that prepared him, because he then went on to co-found Airbyte and create this open source data integration platform with the vision to commoditize data integration pipelines across all industries and organizations across the world. And the fact that 4,000 companies have already synced data using Airbyte and $31 million in funding, I think it all speaks volumes. But over to you. Remember, I want you to share your insights, experiences, stories, whatever it may be. Email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk. You'll find all links to my social channels and over 1,600 interviews on there too. So keep those messages coming in, and I'll speak to you all again tomorrow. So thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.